Hello YouTube, my name is Gary and this is Gary Reads It. This is a channel where I'm going to be focusing on political books. I feel like there's a lot of these politicians and pundits releasing books on politics and they don't expect us in the working class to read them. So I'm going to be reading them and giving a review and kind of a description of what's inside of the book, starting with Chuck Schumer's Antisemitism in America. So in the beginning of the book, he starts off with a foreword, where he kind of points out this problem that I noticed throughout the book, where he says Brooklyn to him, implicitly means Jewish. So every time he would tell people he was from Brooklyn, he would assume that people would think that would mean that he was Jewish or assume he was Jewish, which, me being from Colorado, when I hear Brooklyn, I think of Jay-Z, Biggie Smalls, Lil' Kim. I didn't think of a Jewish community. So the issue I have with Chuck Schumer in the beginning, right in the foreword, is his projection, that he thinks everyone thinks what he thinks about certain terms and demographics. And he makes it like he speaks for all Jews. He does use some sort of statistics to give him some credibility that maybe he's talking for some demographic, but it is very fallacious how he talks for Jews the way he does. In the foreword, he also does compare himself to Moses, how he feels like he's leading the Jews. So I guess there's a little narcissism for every politician, but there's just an example of it right in the beginning of his book, how he feels the same pressure Moses did. He brings up how students are secretly concerned about the protests on college campuses, which was interesting because it sounds a lot like the silent majority argument that Nixon used to bring up, where they're just saying like this, despite all the protests you see on the news, he's hearing whispers and people coming to him in private saying that it's actually the protests that are the problem, not what the protesters are protesting. So no way to verify this secret majority that he has in his pocket, but he does call upon them a lot and uses them to validate his opinion. Uses the ADL, which is an interesting organization, which I have later in my notes, that they would defend the KKK, which there's like this example of them going through a neighborhood with Holocaust survivors and the ADL defending them, saying they have the right to do that. But currently today, they don't defend these protesters on college campuses. So it's just an interesting organization there. And yeah, so we're just going to go on to chapter 1. First off, he has 10 chapters in the book, so it's relatively short, pretty boring. Chapter 1 is called What is Anti-Semitism? Chapter 2, What does it mean to be Jewish? 3, Anti-Semitism throughout history. Chapter 4, Anti-Semitism in America. Chapter 5, Anti-Semitism, Tech, Social Change, and Social Media. Chapter 6, Anti-Semitism on the Right. Chapter 7, Anti-Semitism on the Left. Chapter 8, America, Jews in Israel. Chapter 9, Anti-Semitism and Israel. Chapter 10, his conclusion. So beginning with chapter 1, what is anti-Semitism? So this is where he muddies the water between Jewish people and Israeli citizens. So right in the beginning, he tries to, that's what the chapter's purpose is. He does mention in that chapter that October 7 triggered a rise in anti-Semitism. So what I noticed throughout the book is that he does blame Israel for the rise in anti-Semitism in America. So that would be a lot of people's criticism of a state like Israel, is that it would, it could cause anti-Semitism to rise. And he here in his book does verify that. That's how he sees it as well. So Israel is a definite cause for the rise of anti-Semitism throughout America, or the rise of it. And then also in chapter 1, he fear-mongers with anti-Semitism. Like, he kind of weaponizes a bit, wants you to be afraid of it, makes it seem like it's everywhere all the time, all at once, especially for the successful Jewish people. Like, he makes a point that the capitalist Jew is the one that's most often the victim of anti-Semitism, which is just a crazy thing to say when you got Holocaust survivors that died broke. But he does make that point quite a few times, that the richest Jews are the ones that are the most persecuted. So moving on, chapter 1 is not really much there. Chapter 2, what does it mean to be Jewish? Not too bad of a chapter, because it's kind of like an autobiography where he goes into his own life story. It's not too critical, not too academic in his analysis of what it means to be Jewish. It's just pretty much projection. Again, his version of Judaism. If you do any real research into Judaism or secular Judaism, it kind of more work than he's ever done. So he does mention in 1939 there was no discrimination in the police against Jews. That a lot of Jewish people joined the police force in New York, which I wrote was interesting, because that's about 20 some years before Civil Rights Act. Just interesting fact there about the police force. But again, like how he groups like they're a monolith, like all Jews joined the police force, or Jews have supported the police back then. But yeah, so there's a fact there he points out. His family and friends joined cops. He tracks the first Jew in every industry, so that's a shared cultural thing, because Black Americans do that as well. They even make movies, the first Black swimmer, first Black basketball team, etc. So that is something that, like, if he were to widen or step back and look at the forest, he's like, we have a lot in common: Jewish people, Black people, Muslim people, Arab people, all people. So that's one thing it seems like he doesn't notice, and it just based off of this one book. And he always, the way he looks at policy or looks at anything is, was it good for the Jews? Like the stock market, is it good for the Jews? So, I mean, that's one way to look at it. I guess that's one way for Black people to look at it, or Puerto Rican or immigrants, and it doesn't always turn out so well, especially with current events. He did eat at his segregated establishments, which I don't begrudge him, because like I said, I don't know what I would do in that situation at that time if the food was that good, and they hated your people. Judaism to him equals discussion, debate, food, and family. So again, a tree in a larger forest, because I'm sure that's a lot of families, debate, discussion, food. That's what brings a lot of people together, I've noticed. He's got that. He mentions that he can read Hebrew, but doesn't know what it means. So when he was young, he was taught how to read it, not really what it meant. And that's a big part of being Jewish, is not knowing or understanding everything. And he even says to this day, he still doesn't know what it means. And I thought that was interesting, because he's basing, making foreign policy on his understanding of Judaism and Jews, So he brings up young Israel and a Jewish prayer group, which I just wanted to look into and put a note there, because what I understand about the Christian prayer group is that there's like some shady backroom deals that happen in those that, are something. So if there's like another religion's version of that in America, it'd be interesting, especially considering what our foreign policy and where our tax dollars go. What groups and little groups he hangs out with, what clubs he's a part of. So yeah, he mentions that capitalist Jews are the victim. So that's pretty much it for chapter 2. Chapter 3, anti-Semitism throughout history. So he does say that Jews from a young age are trained to ask themselves, could it happen again? So he's speaking to about the Holocaust. And I think that is a fair trauma that I understand where he's coming from there, you know, having just recently read Anne Frank, and I've read it in the past as well, and done my research. So it makes, and, you know, the movies that come out about it. And I do think it's important to have a very good understanding of what happened at that time, because if you don't, people can use that and weaponize it. So it makes sense. I don't begrudge him there. But it's like it could turn into fear mongering. Like, you could be getting to a toxic point at some point where, you know, currently today people are being kidnapped off the streets, and you're talking about a Holocaust of wealthy Jewish people. And I'm like, we gotta prioritize our resources better. So he does mention in chapter 3, as far as the history of Jews, that he thinks that Moses is a historical person. So he has like a very evangelical way of looking at history, and I thought that was interesting. Because I'm like, I don't know, I just would hope for a more critical, updated understanding of their secular, you know, history. But it does seem pretty basic Bible study, understanding of, you know, like he's seen the Ten Commandments movie, and that's what he thinks really happened. So he does this thing where, like, he says Jews were blamed for spreading diseases during COVID. And I'm like, sure, that conspiracy probably existed. I'm not aware of it. I didn't see it. I don't use Twitter at all. I haven't used Twitter in a decade. And I think that everyone should stop, because, especially senators, because in this book, it's causing some problems. But as far as that, it's like, if you're walking around, from what I saw on a day-to-day basis, the vast majority of the bigotry was targeted towards Asian people when it came to COVID. And that was a thing that a lot of hate was geared towards them. So it's like, I could see how the Jews could have as well gotten some heat from that, because bigots are bigots. They're not, you know, the most discretion, you know, with their hatred. But at the same time, you're missing, again, the forest, because you're stuck on that one tree. And I'm like, if you were to focus on helping everyone, you as well as the Jews would be helped as well. Shared suffrage of peoples, which, like I said, I think that's something working class people can all relate to. He brings up terms like Jewed out or Jew down when he talks about people saying they were cheated. And I'm like, has he heard of the term Indian giver? You know, like, there's everyone, it's like the same type of bigotry, but different labels, insert hate group. So, you know, if you focus on just one, you're letting the other one sprout and grow, and it'll eventually boomerang back to you as by current events, clearly. Jews historically had to become money lenders. Now, he says this, and I've heard this from other people, and I'm like, if I was a rich man, I've heard this song was referenced to like a poor Jew farmer who couldn't even like afford to waste time to talk about his religion, you know? And so I'm like, how are all of these people, Jewish people, money lenders? And what time was this? You know, they never bring up a time frame. So I don't know about, I sure money lenders, some Jews were, but I'm sure Jews were poor as well. So at that time as well. So I don't know why that fact keeps being brought up, but I've heard it, and he brought it up there. Also, he makes it seem like class analysis is anti-Semitic, and that's what I noticed a lot with our Democratic majority or Democratic leader is a class. He doesn't seem to understand class, that there's the working class, that there's the middle class, that there's wealthy people. And then once you bring that up, he then makes it you're being anti-Semitic, and then you're, you know, being irrationally angry at Jewish people for hoarding resources. And it's like, no, it's criticism on all wealthy people hoarding resources, you know. So, but again, he makes that point where he flips class analysis to anti-Semitism. So that is the problem with working with Chuck Schumer, you know, is everything that would like progress and help you as a working person is anti-Semitic to him. He quote farms a lot to make his point, so he'll just go throughout history, find a guy, grab a quote, and it just randomly, you know, through different time frames to make his point that people are super anti-Semitic. And it's like, all right, that's one way to build a case. He shout outs a slave-owning senator, D. Benjamin, back in the Civil War. He talks about a senator who was Jewish, who would have been the highest ranking senator or Jewish person if the South would have won the Civil War. So that's interesting shout out there. He brings up how Jewish people founded institutions because of discrimination, which makes sense. Same with Black Americans, founding of institutions because of discrimination. So this is something that we should be trying to protect and work together to protect and, you know, really end the discrimination part, instead of replicating the same structures, you know, the same institutions that caused the oppression. You know, like, do we need other Greek colleges? Like, has that helped the working class at all? Alpha, Kappa, Beta, whatever those things, like, has any of that helped us in the world, really? Elected to the House in 1981, so that's an example of how old this guy is. September 11, 2001, he says, ends the golden age of Jews. Which one? Think about, when was the golden age of Black America, and when did that end? You know, I guess leave a comment when you would say the golden age of Black America ended. The funniest one will get a shout out in my next video. But yeah, so the golden age of Jews ends in September 11, 2001, which, like, again, this is like with COVID, how he changes it from Chinese people to Jews were the most discriminated. In 2001, I remember the vast majority, lion's share of discrimination going towards Muslim people. And he flips it over to, it was the Jews that were the most discriminated after that. So I'm sure they were some that were, but man, we're still not over the Islamophobia from that. High school teacher hides from students. He brings up this example of how after October 7th, a teacher who supported Israel's actions, genocide in Gaza, was scared to face her students, you know, or his students. So, but in that chapter, in chapter 3, he does state again, and I quoted him, Israel is the focal point of generating anti-Semitism, which I think is very clear today. So moving on to chapter 5. Wait, I skipped chapter 4. Chapter 4. Anti-Semitism in America. It doesn't exist. Go on there. Chapter 5, anti-Semitism, text, social change, and social media. I'll probably have to go back and go through chapter 4 again at some other time and post a video or short about it. And there probably was very little there that he pointed to. But as far as chapter 5 goes, so one I wanted to mention, he doesn't say this at all throughout the book, but anti-Semitism is a socialism of fools. I don't know what that quote is from, but it's something I've heard. But essentially, you tell a person who's anti-Semitic that a Jewish family is hoarding resources that is causing all these problems for the working class. They believe that, but you switch that Jewish family to a capitalist, just a random insert Bezos, insert Mark Zuckerberg, insert whoever, then they will, then it makes no sense to them. So again, socialism it distracts from the actual real problem. Selects facts from France, 1800s. So again, select fact fallacy he constantly uses. Nazi Germany, he brings that up, and also ignores how Nazis killed leftists. So, it doesn't undermine that they kill 6 million Jews, even more, granted, so, but you gotta get into totality of the movement. Otherwise, people will have a distorted view of it. Like, they were killing gypsies, they were killing communists, socialists, they were killing trade workers, they were burning trans books. Like, this should all be discussed when we're talking about this violent organization, So again, no class analysis that is anti-Semitic to him. He's stats on technology concerning Americans. He references the book Anxious Generation, which I've heard about in passing, but it just doesn't seem like a valuable book if you want critical academic understanding of anything. So he cries about online a lot, which everything is online, including anti-Semitism. So if you focus on just that, then you're going to find it in abundance. And that seems to be the case with him, is he is very focused on anti-Semitism. And of course, if you're on Twitter a lot, it's easy to find. So spends a lot of time online. He's aware of a lot of conspiracies. He mentions a lot of conspiracies throughout the book. So again, too much time on Twitter, Senator Schumer, your algorithm hates you. That's what I've come to the conclusion. His algorithm hates him. It is anti-Semitic towards him. So that is his algorithm. I assure you, my algorithm is not anti-Semitic. I listen to Majority Report with Sam Cedar, Norm Finkelstein, Noam Chomsky quite a bit. I have a lot of Jewish love. So he even brings up Taylor Swift in a Nazi uniform in his book. So I haven't even seen this picture. This is how on anti-Semitic my algorithm is. It hasn't even shown me Taylor Swift in the Nazi uniform. So chapter 6, anti-Semitism on the right. He says in this book, belief in ethnic nationalism, belief of hard right. Chuck Schumer when he's quoting Nazis. Now, because he is essentially saying that the Israeli government is comparing them to the Nazis and just quoting the Nazis and their beliefs. You can then apply it to the Israeli government, and he does that throughout the book, where he says they're bringing up anti-Semitism and causing a rise in America. So 2008, more concerned with conspiracies than the truth, is what he's saying was the problem with the right, is the right wing became more, which it's hard to say, because the Democrats become more concerned with what the right's doing and combating the right than the truth as well, where you're clearly losing to these people. And the conspiracies, the reason they're working is because they are speaking to the emotions of people. They feel there's something wrong with government, the police state increasing, with healthcare decreasing. They feel there's something wrong with all of these policies being passed and the foreign policies, but they don't have the facts, and it's hard to know where to get the facts from because everyone's lying. Joe Biden. So it brings up the Great Replacement theory, which he says the Republicans are very concerned about, which I understand that from the article called Browning of America, which basically says that a couple decades, America will be browner. The white population will lose its majority. And if you look at our immigration policies through that framing of that article, it makes our immigration policies make sense. Why we're so aggressive towards people from the southern border, and literally like bringing people from like the white part of Africa, which, all right, there we go. So there's that. Doesn't believe Trump is anti-Semitic, but he does give evidence he is. So that's an interesting thing he does in the book. He does unequivocally state Trump's not anti-Semitic. So his anti-Semitism radar is right on there, pinpoint. He could spot it, you know. So yeah, we can trust Schumer. If he's Moses, if he is Moses, you guys are going to be working for the Egyptians for a lot longer than you think. Anyway, January 6th, how Capitol was attacked. Republicans shifted back. So it brings up the January 6th and what happened then, which was the insurrection, which, I mean, I kind of blame him and his lack of leadership. Like, how the government just doesn't care about that, you know? And I'm like, all right, Chuck Schumer, if you were more of a firebrand, I imagine, like, it's just, you got to take some responsibility there. You can't just keep pointing fingers at Republicans all the time. Anti-Semitism on the left, chapter 7. So moving on, chapter 7. So he does start chapter 7 with Jews are in a lot of leftist movements. So there's that. As far as, just keep that in mind when you think of anti-Semitism on the left. And a lot of leftist movements, there are Jewish people. And it makes sense when you consider less war, healthcare, all of the policies, all the main, you know, ideals align with the vast majority of people, you know. So SDS. So radical dislike forms of protest. So in chapter 7, he goes into a backstory of when he was in college, and he talks about the protests that were happening at the time, either against Vietnam but he talks about how he doesn't like when they're disruptive, how people are rude to him and call him Uncle Tom or call black people Uncle Toms. And I'm like, this is Harvard you went to college at. How many black people were being called Uncle Tom? Like, that's an interesting, you know, to be back there at that time would be interesting. But in Harvard, but he doesn't like disruptive protests. And my point, like Chuck Schumer, no one likes them. No one likes to have to give up their day to fight for their rights, you know, to have food in their mouths or to feed their kids or to bring their kids to school. No one likes them, Chuck. So that's why they're the most effective. That's why they need to be protected. And this part where he talks about disruptive protests was just disappointing, pathetic, and lazy. And he did join the protest, though. So he eventually ended up joining them once he got irritated enough, which, I mean, I don't know. No reflection there on the value of them at any point. Disagrees Israel needs to follow international law. So he does make that a point in chapter 7. So anti-Semitism on the left. Understand Israel does not need to follow international law. And he has some weird judo ways of like mental gymnastics, verbal gymnastics to get you there as well. He does say war in Gaza became a focal point, which once again it has. So multiple times throughout the last 80 years, it has become a focal point. He brings up examples of Jews being harassed, uses incidents despite lack of info. So despite what's going on in Gaza, despite like the Palestinian child that was stabbed, and despite the rise in Islamophobia and hate crimes there, he uses any of his silent majority examples to validate that anti-Semitism is on the rise. And it's like, sure, I can agree with you, but can we go and dissect why and get an understanding so we can prevent it? And because the more you know, the better, right? Not with him. The lack of info, it seems to be the best. It seems to be what he is focused on, what has the least information and to make his point. Like, so yeah, it is hard to it will be hard to negotiate with this man when trying to, for anything, even healthcare. He is so focused on ending anti-Semitism that I don't see him like, or not even ending anti-Semitism, fear-mongering about it, and that's really his only thing. He's a fear-monger about it. It's his only objective. Like, despite everything that's happening in the world with the people being kidnapped, despite the genocide, despite free speech being shut down, anti-Semitism for wealthy people we need to be scared of that. Anyway, moving on. Uses incidents despite lack of info. Attacks on synagogues. And I was like, is there any left-wing attacks on synagogues? So I just had to note that if that's a thing. He does in chapter 7 say Zionist is a substitute for Jews. So that's where a lot of this anti-Semitism he says is coming from. Is people whoever says Zionist or criticizes Zionist is actually mean Jewish, and it is very convoluted how he gets there and insidious, and so there's essentially no way to talk about that government, because every way you can, he turns it into an anti-Semitic way, where it's like you talk about Zionists, who is someone who is, wants to get rid of Palestine altogether, and he's like, well, that's talking about all Jews, and it's like, no, it's not. There are plenty of Jewish people he doesn't know what secular Judaism is. So once again, in his first chapters, in the beginning of the book, he talks about how he doesn't understand Judaism, and it becomes clear when he talks about chapter 7. In chapter 7, he talks about Karl Marx and the Jewish question, which I would have to look into. I'm not sure what Karl Marx has to say on that. Nobody really reads in the working class that I know reads Karl Marx at all. He's like Charles Darwin, where people who debate evolution like talk about what Charles Darwin had to say, when it's like, dude, that's science. We're well beyond Darwin here. So as far as Marx, it's like we got to be well beyond that. By the way, the FBI kills people who talk about that guy, so he doesn't really get brought up too much. UK Labour, Corbyn, he says, is anti-Semitic, so I guess I'm pretty sure that was a person who's just against Israel. So he labels Corbyn and the UK Labour Party anti-Semitic as an example of the left being anti-Semitic. He says that Jews were pro-civil rights, anti-Vietnam War. So he just speaks for all Jews here, because I'm like, Norman Finkelstein says that they were pro-civil rights in every neighborhood but theirs, and I'm sure it's a combination of all kinds of things. It can't be one monolith, so, but he does try to speak for all Jews a lot. He talks about the 6-Day War. He says Louis Farrakhan is left-wing. He says if you look at the world through an oppressed framing, you'll make Israel look bad. Okay. So sorry for Israel. At that point, we got to feel bad. Now we got to change oppressor. We got to now come up with convoluted this even more. You got to make it harder than that because of Israel. Won't be friends with Israel supporter. He says there's a study in Tufts University that says a bunch of people who said they won't be friends with Israel supporters. And he then turns that to say that means that those people won't be friends with Jews. He does this a lot. If you talk about Israel or its supporters or just that specific group, you mean Jews, is what he then turns it into. So it's ridiculous and it is fallacious. It's called slippery slope. 8 out of 10 American Jews caring about Israel is important, is what he says. Now, this is a common problem he talks about early on as well. But the education on what Israel is seems to be like the problem for young Americans. Like, Israel is a foreign country, right? For anybody to care so much about a foreign country is problematic. Right? We need to care about the world, right? Ours, so them sitting there, and then they have this irrational emotional attachment to this foreign country, and you wonder why it's so hard to have a discussion, is because, of these types of statements. 8 out of 10 Jews caring about Israel is important. Why would caring about an foreign country be important to Americans? Why is that so? And why are you doing that? What is the value there? Clearly it's only made anti-Semitism rise in America because of that. So it is definitely antithetical to your goals. He calls out Ilya and Omar, which I point out because he calls out 0 Republicans in this book. It's when he's even talk about when they flipped on January 6th, he calls out Ilya and Omar for saying all about the Benjamins. So he says, river to the sea, Palestine to be free equals Holocaust, right? So there's that. My thing about that is it doesn't have to if you just free them. You don't have to sit there and say, well, you'll only be free if you kill us first. You don't have to put that line in the sand and plant that flag. You could free them. He brings up the 1988 Hamas Charter, which my question is, who wrote that? And how do you have that speak for the entire, like, a new generation? It's 1988. Most people in Palestine are babies and children. Like, why are you using that to speak for these people? Why does Israel get to change their story every time they're caught in a lie, and Hamas has to be stuck with 1988 charter that we don't even tell me who wrote it. You know, don't even say who wrote it. He says, having the right to exist means by any means necessary means killing Jews. So if a Palestinian says they have the right to exist by any means necessary, that means killing Jews. And once again, why are you making that line in the sand? You don't have to do that, Chuck Schumer. You're doing that, right? You're very irrational. Directly link Israel to rise of anti-Semitism. This is something he makes clear in chapter 7 of his book. And you can see how pro-Palestine protests to him look like pro-terrorists. He says this in chapter 7. You guys who are pro-Palestinian look pro-terrorist to him. That's laziness of our Senate leader. Meets random protest leaders, responds to civilians' death with reasons why Jews deserve land. So he'll meet a random protest leader. They'll say the civilian deaths are wrong, and when you do something about it, it's like, this is why the Jews deserve land. So completely irrational person to discuss this with. He does make it clear throughout the book that he's more concerned about making Israel a bipartisan thing with both parties support than he is about working class, which is so obvious. So obvious. Like, after all these years, 1980 something, this guy's been in freaking Congress, and all that has really been accomplished is Israel getting millions and billions of dollars, right? Protesting Zionists is anti-Semitic to him. So he does make that clear in chapter 7 as well. So that, if you're trying to understand the world through his framing, understand if you say Zionist, you're talking about Jews to him. So we got to get a new word because he's weaponized it. He's very cynical. American Jews in Israel, chapter 8. He does a lot of myth making for Israel. So there's that. He does a lot of work for Israel. Not Jewish theocratic. He says it's not a Jewish theocratic state, but home for Jewish peoplehood and culture. How he's squaring this circle? Yeah, because it's making it more sound like white only, Jim Crow. The more he speaks about it in this way, where he talks about how they have all the jobs, you know, and all the things that they're able to do. And I'm like, wait, weren't Palestinians able to get their schools bombed? He talks about the 1917 Balfour Declaration, which is of note because it says, calls for a religious and civil rights of Palestinians and right of Jewish communities. So it's long overdue for them to have a state. However, if you read Gaza or Requiem into Martyrdom, or any of it brings up the reports that says that essentially that Gaza was unlivable in 2020, and we've long known that, so we're well past unlivable phase. They're just sweeping up the rest. 1947, Israel defeating multiple armies. Oh, he talks about in 1947 Israel had to defeat multiple armies, and that made Jews feel cool, which to me is projection. It made him feel cool. When he hears about the victories that Israel army's military has, he feels awesome about it, which is sociopathic, which is sick. Learn history of canon, or which is childish, I guess, not sick. I can see where it's kind of, I would probably feel that way when I was younger, but you eventually grow and you learn more about what these conflicts are about, and you're not so my team about them, you know, eventually. Learn history of canon in Hebrew school. Okay. So, I mean, I guess the Hebrew schools, I guess, are, what he points out are probably, this is where the indoctrination begins on an actual foreign policy. We're not talking about theology anymore. We're talking about how geographic, how we as a country interacts with the rest of the world, and this is being trained to children at a young age. Instead of going to the Senate floor and arguing in the courts to get your point across, you are indoctrinating children so that 8 out of 10 American Jews care about Israel is important to them, right? Like, you can make statements like that, and there's like, they have this irrational emotional attachment to a foreign country. So it starts with these Hebrew schools. Jew went meekly to their fate. He does victim blame the Holocaust people who died in the Holocaust. He says, how could Jews let Nazis do this to us? I've never heard these statements. So to hear them from a Zionist is kind of gross, but this is a common thing I hear with Zionists, is that, they look down on their Holocaust ancestors and people who survived or went through that. And, they see themselves as better because of what they're doing to the Middle East. Victim blame Jew, Israel brought back pride is what he's saying. So yeah, that's like a dangerous thing to say, and him to state that's why people would get a misunderstanding, and that could be why the anti-Semitism would increase. So he's fuel to the fire here. Fortunately, if you go to any pro-Palestinian or any anti-war or any protest, you'll see Jewish people there, despite the mainstream media ignoring them. Claims Jews talked about Holocaust every night. So yeah, he just, a lot of trauma there. But it's like every Jewish family, that's all they talked about was the Holocaust every night. Are you sure there was ones that didn't want to talk about it at all, like Norm Finkelstein's family, for example? So I just know for a fact he doesn't speak for all Jews, and the way he has such an authority over them, problematic. He says, in Israel, Jews hold every occupation in Israel. So that's where you get that Jim Crow South from, where, okay, so in order to be employed, you have to be a certain ethnicity or race or creed. That's problematic in 2025, which should be well past that. It's not about your favorite book, it's about what's right or wrong, and that's wrong. To sit there and discriminate on garbage men, saying Jews cannot have state is anti-Semitic. So that's another thing about how he's weaponized anti-Semitism. Is after 2016, it's been defined that any criticism of Israel, comparing it to Nazi Germany, is anti-Semitic. So despite them actually committing a genocide and having like incendiary statements, you can't, if you make those comparisons, you're still considered anti-Semitic according to the ADL. And to him, according to Chuck Schumer, because every other person to him gets a state except the Jews. So as soon as the Jews get one, now we're being anti-Semitic and trying to stop them. And I'm like, no, what we're saying is you can't steal land by force. Are you stealing land by force? Then you can't do that anymore. You're wrong. You have to give up all that land. We change it back to Palestine. You guys can be Palestinians, and those who were in the settlements can go to jail. So just so they can all have justice. We can do this without the final solution being invoked. It's not going to boomerang back to that degree. It's going to, justice is just going to be served, very focused on keeping Israel bipartisan. And he makes that like that was his goal throughout his time in Congress, which is sad, because I'm like, you should be focused on Americans. And then he says it is anti-Semitic to say that Jews have dual loyalty. And it's like, I'm not saying that. I'm saying you Chuck Schumer prioritize Israel over healthcare, jobs, over every housing. All right, let's get out of it. Move on. He was against the Iran nuclear deal. He is a sock puppet, not the puppet used with strings, the one you put up into the butt and move the mouth. He is that. So he was against. He was proud of that. He was friends with Netanyahu. They ate together in the home. Netanyahu sprayed soda all over his home. So he does say that they all had a good laugh together when talking about Israel's economy. So that's one thing. A former friend of this guy leading the Israeli government that they're trying to say is completely to blame for it. Yeah, he was friends with him. Bibi not open to a two-state solution. Double standard Israel is facing. So I don't know. He can hate Bibi and love Israel is what he's trying to say here. And I'm like, the issue is like, you can't separate. Who are they going to elect next? When everyone in their government and everyone who they want to vote for, and they're making songs about burning Gaza, and they've been fear-mongered so much about Muslim people and Palestinians. Like, you need another solution here. You can't blame one person. You can't just, this is a genocide. You know, no genocide is enacted by just one person. Palestinian protests look like terrorists. Every life lost in Holocaust is countless babies. This is what he says. So he thinks about how many people were killed in the Holocaust back in the day, and he says any life lost is countless babies. He makes that quote. And I would then say, think about Gaza, Ed, how many babies are dying. Every life lost is countless babies. Chuck Schumer, apply that same logic to who you claim. How are they using human shields if you're dropping bombs on them? All right. Went to Israel after October 7th. So in chapter 9, Antisemitism and Israel. He went to Israel after October 7th, barely mentions Palestine. He says Hamas uses human shields in this chapter. He says protesters are too mean. 2009 to 2014 also rise in anti-Semitism because of Israel. So he just mentions that fact. Once again, if you want examples of how Israel is causing the rise in anti-Semitism, look no further than Chuck Schumer's book on the rise of anti-Semitism in America. It is Israel and their government and just what the whole colonization project is, you know, and the fact that they're using Judaism. That's the problem. It's not even Judaism that, if you study secular Judaism, just look into that, you will see that it is not Judaism. It is pretty much evangelical Christians doing this. That's another video. Not very nuanced understanding of Israel is what I point out is to him. Okay to question policies, not existence, is what he says. You can question his policies, not his existence. And I'm like, we got to vote this guy out, because he's defining the lines here, where if you question his existence and his policies, like, my thing, can any state, if we cut off its tax dollars, it doesn't exist. Right? So that's why you can't talk about removing our tax dollars to him. That's how he's using that. So that is how it's being weaponized. That's the cynical part, where I'm like, sure, we don't have to talk about its existence. Let's just talk about its policies. I don't support these policies, and we shouldn't be giving it money. Our policy shouldn't be supporting it. Our tax dollars shouldn't be funding it. And it's like, well, if we don't fund it, it won't exist. Therefore, if we're talking about its existence by talking about its policies, it is crap. It is crap. 2016 definition of anti-Semitism. Objective, nuanced views of Israel anti-Semitic. It's essentially, if you're looking at 2016 in the ADL's definition of anti-Semitism and how they updated it, it does pretty much protect Israel from any criticism. Comparing contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis is anti-Semitic. So, according to the definition of anti-Semitism past 2016, which, again, Israel is a foreign country that has hijacked has hijacked Judaism. Like, it just uses a lot of its rhetoric. It uses its backstory. It uses its mythology, but it then mixes in its foreign policy and its actual policies. But if you were to remove the Judaism, you would still have a very powerful religion and peoplehood and culture, and then you would have a psychopathic state country that, you know, we shouldn't be giving our tax dollars to. Are people challenging statehood or funding and tax dollars? Anyway, so genocide was actually a response to the attack, is what he says. So because they were attacked, they had to commit a genocide. And in chapter 9, Israel goes too far with holding resources. Hamas uses human shields. So even when we talk about what the decades before where they were starving these people, you know, it's like, well, they're using, how do you use human shields on, like, not getting humanitarian aid? What is that? You eat their lack of resources? Like, I don't even how he's able to stretch that and keep using that, and himself not sit there and think critically about that, you know, because it's so into his misunderstanding of Judaism. Again, in his book, he says he doesn't understand Judaism. He just knows how to read Hebrew. Saying Israel is committing genocide is mean to Jews, is what he says. So that's why you can't say it, because it's mean to Jews, even though it's Jewish people who are saying it as well. So again, for him to take in the way he writes, the way he speaks, is ridiculous. And it makes it harder to convince Israel to stop. So when you tell Israel what they're doing is wrong, it makes it harder for them to stop. In 1947, Pashtun make 2 states. It was clear Arabs would have to move, then Jews would have to move from Arab states, Middle Eastern refugees. So he brings up like this reverse Nakba, which recently Ethan Klein had a video about, but essentially Israel government does the Nakba, kicks Palestinians out of their country, and then in order to boost up their demographic and their population of Jewish people, they do false flag campaigns in Middle Eastern countries to convince the Jewish population to move to Israel. And the difference is that Palestinians didn't have a choice, Jews did, and they weren't treated good when they got to Israel. It was all, like I said, false flags. They were trying to build up their population. So and then the 2-state solution has led to a genocide. So everyone who keeps advocating for a 2-state, which Chuck Schumer does, he says he wants a 2-state. This is where it has led. It has led to the death of all these Palestinian children. Chapter 10 is his conclusion, and it pretty much ends, and I'll end it here, where he says, America, a place where you can be 100% Jewish and 100% American. And yeah, Chuck Schumer, America could be something very great if you were to be working for everybody instead of just yourself and your version of what Jewish people are. And so yeah, you know, so like, subscribe, comment, let me know what other political books you would like me to go over and review, and let me know if this is a good project and if something you would be supporting.